Good morning. I'm Bill Pollack, and we're at Beverly Hills at Bruce Meyer's incredible garage, and this is all part of the Peterson Archive program and collecting some of the great history of automobile and what went on in the early days. I'm here with our guest and owner of this incredible array, Bruce Myers.
Thank you, Bill.
And Bruce, can we take a quick
Sure,
look at what
absolutely,
we got here?
right.
So just some
Well, this is our back garage, and to my right, your left, is Loyal Katsky's D-Type that was delivered right here in Beverly Hills, and then went right immediately back to the Midwest, and was a very, very successful racer in the Midwest, and raced at Nassau Speed Week and Sebring by Loyal Katsky, and then it had a couple other distinguished, Midwest owners, and I'm probably the only person that hasn't put it on the track, but we've had it several of the Millias and the California Millets and that type of thing, but it's a wonderful car and one of my all-time favorites.
It's too pretty to put it.
I still have my dinky toy from way back when. I've always admired the D-Type. I particularly love the shape.
One of the more beautiful cars that were ever designed, I think. Is it beautiful?
Yeah, still.
What's this baby?
The next one is a wonderful car. I've had this actually since 1970. I bought it from Bill Doheny, and this was he was the Ferrari distributor, very closely tied with Ferrari, and I guess he got a new car every year. And this is a 1967 GTB 4-cam, and original paint colors, and it's had a little touch-up work here and there, but for the most part, very original. It's has just turned 30,000 original miles on it. And I've enjoyed this over the years. As I say, I remember when I first got it in 1970, I'd just gotten married, and then the children came, and I stopped driving it daily and kind of just preserved it and enjoy it very, very much. And I drive it, somewhere once a month, have a good time with that.
Great.
And of course, behind me is the Cobra 427 SC.
Oh my.
And this is, that's a car that, to me is the e-ticket. And has always been a very exciting and stimulating car, even to this day.
Absolutely.
And this car was bought new by a friend of mine, Jeff Cannon. So it has no particular race history. It really has never been on a racetrack, but it's a totally original car. I mean, the seats are the original trim. I mean, it is a very unmolested Porsche Cobra SC, and most of those have been wrecked or rolled or something.
I know, it's hard to find one that's pristine.
Yeah. And then behind there is a Mercedes that I bought from Clark Gable's widow. After Clark passed away, she put the car in storage. It's a 1956 300 SC Mercedes Cabriolet, one of 48 made. Still has his St. Christopher's, like every car had in the day. St. Christopher's medal. Yeah, on the dash. Engraved CG, and it has his luggage in the trunk, all fitted by Mercedes. And that was the original colors and much of the original paint.
What is the name of that car, do you remember?
Tobacco brown, I think they called it.
I love that car.
And it's a beautiful tan interior, mostly original. I had to do some retrimming on the front seats, but everything else is original, just the way it was found. When Clark passed away, his wife actually gave it to their mechanic out in the valley, Lothar, and I forget his last name.
Lothenbacher.
I'm not sure if it was Mothenbacher, but it was a...
Oh, okay.
His name was Lothar, and we all know Lothar.
How many Lothar?
I don't think he was a racer, because he just put it on the blankets, and I found the car, in 1980, so I've had it over 20 years. It's a wonderful car. And then next to us is a little Deuce Coupe with a Scott-blown Arden in it. I said to my son, if you were Lance or Ventlow, a buddy of yours, in 1950 and you were a hot rodder, this is what it would be, with a chopped three window with Arden heads on a flathead and a Scott blower. So this kind of runs the gamut from hot rodding to sports car racing, and behind there is a Type 57 C Bugatti, and we use that. It's not an extraordinary body style, but it's just the engineering of that car that makes it so stimulating. When it starts up, it sounds like a small block Chevy, with that blower whirring around. So
incredible.
It's good fun. It's good fun.
Well, I'd like to know how this all started. This I see the fruition and the end result of a lot of hard work and perseverance. But tell me about 30 years ago or 40 years ago. What turned you on to this?
Well, I think it was 60 years ago.
You know.
And when I was born, I think I was born with that mutant gene, that just absolutely turns your whole life towards the automobile. And I have always been a fan of the automobile. My mother wrote in my baby book, which we found after her passing, the little clip of my hair was a blanket Mother was to fill out, and it says, Mother's first impressions. And my mother wrote, Bruce loves anything with wheels. And that's about as early as it gets. And it's always been that way. My parents were not crazy about the automobile, other than to, get you from A to B. They'd buy the cheapest model Chrysler, and they would keep it, like well beyond what I thought was necessary, 8-10 years back then, and then they'd buy a new one. So I subscribed to Boy's Life and Hot Rod magazine, and if they could get to the hot rods before I did, they were thrown away. They were not a fan of the automobile. So it was just in my makeup to love the automobile. And when I was growing up, anything to do with cars, I say they would try and put that fire out, but it just, you can't do that. When it's in your blood, that's the way it is. So I went off to school, and I'd always saved my money, always hoping to have a 40 Ford. That was my dream car.
Pretty car.
Yeah. So when I tried to buy that, my parents wouldn't let me. When I was 16, my great aunt died and left me a 50 Plymouth Turtleback in green, and to share with my sister, no less. That was my first car, official first car, and that was about as uncool as it got.
Is that a 3-window?
It was basically, it was kind of a turtleback, so it was basically a 5-window. It had two big sweeping rear windows. So I had that when I was in high school, and then when I went off to college, I went off to school, and when I was going through orientation, somehow, you go through all these little stations, whether, for class enrollment and so forth and so on. I went to the student loan line. Just appeared there. It was divine, because here I was, my dad had actually given me my tuition money, and they said, well, you can borrow the tuition, and, as long as you pay it back by the end of the year, it's interest-free. And I go, well, that works, So I took
I know what's coming.
newfound wealth. And here I am, 17 years old. First thing I went out and bought a 50 Merc, and I just some old clapped out BSA 650. And that was my motor pool. So obviously, I never let as I guess Mark Twain said, never let school get in the way of his education. I was off and running, so as a freshman to have a 50 Merc and a cool motorcycle, that was the genesis of like where my head was at the time, because obviously my parents didn't approve of motorcycles. I had a kind of a made-up Whizzer stored in a friend of mine's garage, and I got caught by the police driving without a license and everything else. So then, those days you had to appear with your parents, so they heard about that, and that ended my two-wheel motorized career early. But then as I say, I jumped back in. So now I've got some motorcycles over here. As I say, I love the motorcycles. I was very much interested in hot rods as a youth. And I don't know, do you want me just to keep rambling on here?
Absolutely.
I was very much interested in hot rods. I always wanted like a chopped 3-window or a 40 Ford. Those were just like my most favorite cars. And then when I was in my mid-20s, early 20s, I was still just, I was still noodling around with terrible cars through the tuition loan program, a college grant for a car. And my parents always said they'd help me with my first car. And so I think I was like 20, I was 20 years old, 19 years old, and it was time that I should have an official first car. So I was going to buy a 1960 Chevrolet, and I went and I checked out, I think it was a Biscayne, the very cheap body style with the biggest motor that they could put in it. And I found out that I could get that for about $2,500. And then it was right at that time I thought I was going to take I needed like a little rest from college, so I was going to take an around the world tour. And I thought, it's silly to get a car and then leave it set. So I started looking, and I always was intrigued by Porsches. So, and I lived in Hollywood. My paper corner, I passed by it last night, was Highland and Melrose. And I had that little island. It was the most fabulous paper corner in all of LA. You know, location, location,
Yeah.
location, you know. So anyway, I went up to see John von Neumann up in Hollywood and found out that I could buy a Porsche, 1960 Porsche, for like it was $2,300 or $2,400, and it cost me about $300 or $400 to get it back. So I convinced my parents that you know, for the same money I could have a Porsche, have it in Europe when I made my loop, and it was just a cute little car. It was nothing much more than a Volkswagen. And so off I went, and I picked up a Porsche, actually, and I picked it up in 1960. It was a 1961 model. And from that point on, I switched from hot rods to sporty cars. And I just was crazy about Porsche, and I had this little Porsche. I had it all the way through college. And then when I graduated from college,
What model it was?
yeah, it was a B 1600 normal, because when I bought that car, the only special I had was called Signal Red. So it was a red. I have a picture of it over here in the garage somewhere. But it was basically a Signal Red coupe with no options at all, because I was just lucky to have the thing.
Yeah, right.
And so from there, I took a bartending job from college. I went to Berkeley, and when I graduated Berkeley, I took a bartending job up at Lake Tahoe. And do you remember Moreland Vicel? Does that name ring a bell?
Vicel, yes.
He was a car racer and a boat racer. And he ran a place called the Sierra Tahoe Boat Company. And he had a gull-wing sitting in the storage shed where they stored all the wooden boats. And I mean, of course, the gull-wing was always like everybody's. Wasn't that everybody's favorite?
It was one of the,
Great car.
absolutely.
And back then, people would say, oh, those foreign cars, they're just nothing but trouble. And I saw this car, and it had a reverse trigger on the gear shift knob. And I figured it out real quick that it had a Chevrolet engine in it. And I thought, this is the answer. No problems, a Chevrolet engine, a going. So I bought the car, sold my Porsche up at Tahoe for more than I paid for it. I think I sold it for close to $4,000, and it was ridiculous. I mean, the car was really nice. I kept it nice. And I bought this going with a Chevy in it. I took it to the drags. It turned 113 and a quarter. It was fast.
That's pretty good.
It was really good. And of course, I lived not too far from Carroll Shelby's little high-performance motors on Highland and near Olympic.
Uh-huh.
So I would go over there with this gull-wing with a Chevy in it, and I would just wait for them to test drive these Cobras, and I would just embarrass them. And the car was seriously fast. But every time I'd open the hood, they go, oh God, so I got tired of that. I was embarrassed, by it. I figured, well, it was great fun. So I actually sold it to a fraternity brother of mine who is a great vintage racer, Bill Harlan, who raced an Allard. He used to race that white Allard, remember, up at the early years of the Steve Earle's Historic. And he still has it today with that wonderful Chevy engine in it, fast as can be. And so I then turned around and I bought from Hal Wallace, the movie producer. I bought an all-stock, very low mileage, 1959, I believe, 300 SL Roadster, silver one. And then I had that, and then I was back into the originality, big time. And so then I went through a series of Porsches, and I guess the real first collector car I had was the Gullwing and then the 300 SL Roadster. And I've always had a 300 SL up until a month ago, which I sold it. It's actually at the Peterson Museum. I bought this fellow, Knox Farrand. I bought this car from him. I owned it 30 years. 300 SL, I bought it. He was the original owner. It had 12,000 miles. I restored it. Junior painted it. And I just bought a real special car recently, and I sold my dual cow Packard. I sold my Gullwing. I sold my GT350. I had to scrape some dollars together to buy Johnny von Neumann's 625 TRC that ran the 250 TR motor that Richard Ginther drove, and Ken Miles and John von Neumann. So that's the project I'm working on now, and we should have that ready pretty soon. So I guess that kind of covers. I mean, I've always loved motorcycles, sports cars, and a number of years ago, it's been probably 15 years ago, well, the gosh, it's been more than that. In '79, I got back into hot rodding. I bought a little Roadster that was on the cover of Hot Rod magazine. And so in '79 I got into hot rodding, and then I started thinking about like the historic hot rods, and I started buying the historic hot rods. Because I feel that hot rodding is one of the real, underappreciated.
Well, it's a unique art form that's particular to this country. It doesn't exist anywhere else in the world.
Exactly. It's Genesis right here. I figure hot rodding and jazz and, a few other, very American art forms, and were very underappreciated and underexposed. So I started buying historic hot rods, and I've had a lot of fun with those. People say, well, they think of me in hot rodding, but frankly, I love them all. Anything that roars and has fun. And I guess, the history part, and this is what's so great for what you're doing, is, we have some of these wonderful, living legends. And I must say, and I'm sure you're one of them. And I really mean that because, earlier we were talking about the Baldwin special, and we all remember how you performed in your Allard. I mean, what my life is all about is admiring guys like yourself that really were the genesis of this whole movement. And the fact that you're taking your time, and Stephen as well behind the camera, I just think is marvelous. I mean, I don't think I'm worthy, but I'll do whatever I can to promote, the automobile and promote the legends that made them so terrific. And
well, we had a lot of fun, and I don't think at the time that we legends, or if you want to call it, were racing, that we considered it that. It was just, boy, it was just such a wonderful experience and exciting. And I just I didn't want to see it all just sort of disappear, slowly erode, as I saw one after another of some of my peers and friends take off to the other world. I thought we ought to capture some of this.
Well, I think Steve Earle probably started a lot of this whole, genesis, the whole regeneration. And I remember
absolutely.
with Steve's brother Jim Luckman, having dinner when I first met you up at his house up on Coldwater Canyon. And Jim was just starting to get back into racing, and guys like yourself, you did it at the time because it was sport. I mean, it wasn't like you were thinking of history. You were doing it because you loved every minute of it. And as soon as there was a better car, you put the old one aside and jump in the newer, faster, better. And it's it's a wonderful thing how every now and then you find some people that really want to keep the history.
What was also interesting, Bruce, was that all those cars that we raced, there was like a gap before Steve Earle came along to start the historics, and vintage racing became a popular sport. You couldn't give those cars away. They were all obsolete. You couldn't drive them on the highway. They were all, these, not this car, but a lot of similar machines, a lot of competition Ferraris could be had for peanuts.
Well, yesterday I was talking, because I had some friends over in the garage, and there was a fellow named Tom Martindale. Do you remember Tom Martindale?
I know the name.
Martindale's Books over here on Santa Monica.
Okay, that's where I know.
His parents lived directly across the street from me. Well, when I bought this car in 1970, I paid $10,750 for it. And at the time, market price was more like between $9,500 and $10,000. But I saw this car for the first time as it pulled in SD Zipper over on Wilshire. There were Ferrari and a Porsche dealership.
Right.
Bill Doheny drove this car into the dealership. It had a yellow cab driver's hat on the back shelf, just like it does now. And it was like it was like probably my son seeing his first Countach. It was like so outrageous.
Yeah.
And so I just had to have this particular car. Well, I hadn't had this car but 6 months, and I'm driving down Melrose Avenue, and Tommy Martindale had a little shop that was a two-car garage, basically, and in there was a yellow GTO. And Tommy said, "This is really what you ought to have." And I looked at it, it was $10,000. And I looked at that thing, and I thought, yeah, I've got a shiny new one. It looks almost like it. What do I want to do that for? I mean, I actually thought about it for a minute because it was a race car. And I looked at it, and the doors were all like real, like light, and there's no roll-ups. And what do I, thanks, Tom, anyways, and I left. So here I am. The guy that bought it was George Dyer. He bought one about the same time as I bought this, And of course, he was offered $15 million for his car. Never got quite that high, but I love this car just the same. But you're right. I mean, old race cars were just yesterday's news, weren't they?
Like, you know, like,
Yeah.
like the D Jaguar.
Yeah.
You know, they were, what do you do with them? Carlisle Blackwell, who was a fashion photographer.
Oh,
lived in
yeah.
the valley not far from me.
Yeah.
You know, his used to sit in the garage and Carlisle would go out every day and wipe it off and polish it. But he couldn't drive it, couldn't take it out on the highway, couldn't, you know.
Well, it was his car, Carlisle Blackwell's car, that inspired me to buy this one. It was a twin almost to this one.
Yeah, but one of the few that had the fin.
Right. Now, and interestingly enough, I don't think any of the customer cars came with fins. I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think so.
But this particular car was, when Briggs Cunningham sold his Ferrari distributorship in New York, the fellow that owned this car went and got that rear clip with a fin on it from Jaguar. So that is a factory, you know, fin, and it really looks right. You know, I mean, I've seen some where people have applied them aftermarket, but they don't look quite right. So that is actually a factory rear clip on that car. And this fellow that bought it, I want to say Sunderman, went and he, you know, bought that, and he bought a few other miscellaneous pieces, and it kind of stayed with the car. And then it was restored. But Carlisle Blackwell's car was dark green just like that.
Right.
And a fellow named Jimmy Levitt bought it from him. And everybody just couldn't believe that Levitt got it away from Carlisle Blackwell.
Well, he bought it from Julie.
Is that after he died?
Yeah.
Everybody wanted that car.
$20,000.
Yeah. And so I just looked at, and I tell you what, this car, it has a fan on it, but I never turn it on. I drive this car once a month somewhere, right through town, you know, and it doesn't overheat, and it has so much torque, and it's just wonderful. I enjoy this car as much as anything I have.
Isn't that plates? Is it street legal?
It is, yeah. It is. It's actually registered out of state, because when I bought it in the late 80s from Stony Stallenwork, who owned it for about 10 years before. So it's been, you know, it's been very well cared for. Speaking of Briggs Cunningham, another car that I have is his Le Mans in 1960. Chevrolet got together with Cunningham and they fielded 3 cars at Le Mans. And I have one of those, and I like particularly the sports racing cars that you can drive on the street. Because I'm not good enough, and I don't have the time to really mount a vintage race program. So I do, you know, these 1,000-mile rallies, and I'll leave early some morning and drive up to Otis Chandler's or somebody like that, and you know, just enjoy the cars, and you know, that's what I do, you know, with my sports racing cars.
I think that's important. I kind of abhor the people that put them on a pedestal and they just sit there and sit there and sit there and they get waxed, and the wax is about a half an inch thick. I mean, these cars are meant to be driven.
Oh, yeah.
If you're not going to drive it, then...
That's really the fun part. Now, you know, I think there's different levels. Like in England, they take these cars out and they drive them in anger. And they drive them like they were driven in the period, and they whack them and bash them and crash them. I don't know if you've seen any of these races like the Revival. I mean, that is like the very, you know, upper end of use. I mean, you know, with lack of respect. Then the other end of the, you know, paradigm is where you're saying, where somebody does a car, they do it so nice, they don't even want to drive it, and they just wax it and it's never driven, and they pickle it.
Yeah.
I'm somewhere in the middle, because there's guys that think I should have that out and take it to the historics, and I just think I'd embarrass the car.
I don't know about that. I think Steve Earle had the right idea, you know, in his vintage racing. He makes it very clear. I want you to go out, I want you to have fun, but if you touch someone, or if you go off the course, your history.
Yeah.
You know, we're going to send you home. You can just stay there for a year or two. And
you know, Steve has been criticized for some of his, you know, like, you know, what do they call it? A friendly dictator. Oh gosh. Anyways, he runs that program just the way he wants to run it, and I'll tell you, he's done a spectacular job. And I so agree with that concept, because people are there to enjoy the cars. They're not there to see who has the fastest car necessarily, or who is the best driver. But people want to see these cars run. You know, and of course it is racing, but he just does a great job.
well, it's an exhibition, and there are always a couple of guys out there that are trying to make a mark for themselves. And you can spot them right away. But most of the people that are out in the historic races, are, they're out there to have a good time, and they're driving the cars reasonably fast. And that's about, they're not trying to get the last 2% out of it.
Right.
Because that's when you do something bad or make some terrible mistake.
Yeah.
And, that's what Earl's trying to avoid. He doesn't want somebody to roll one of these up into a ball.
And hurt
Or
themselves.
or hurt
The car.
somebody,
Yeah. So it's a wonderful program.
That's what finished Pebble Beach. When we raced over on the old Del Monte 17-mile drive was, when Ernie killed himself, that was the end.
Yeah.
It was all over. We put the Ferrari into the trees.
That's right. That was one of Doheny's cars too, wasn't it? That 121
It
LM.
certainly was. It was that 6-cylinder car that I think it had already killed somebody.
Very, very
It was
fascinating.
probably one of the few Ferraris that was not a very good handling car.
Yeah. So I enjoy these, and I enjoy having my pals over.
Well, it's good
And,
for us.
I just appreciate the fact that you're doing this archiving, and I can't wait to see. I know you've been getting some wonderful old timers involved.
We're having a good time with it. Going to go see Wally Parks next week, as a matter of fact. And going out, I'll get my fill of hot rods then.
Yeah.
But we have a lot in common because I've seen I've had a lot of sports cars, but in my youth I had hot rods, and I had a channeled 32 and a step-in bathtub or whatever they call it, tuck and roll, and no engine cowl, and just a lot of hot water in your face and oil and stuff.
Well, for years I campaigned at Pebble Beach, the Concours, to put hot rods in there. And Lauren Tryon and Jules Human just said, Bruce, forget it. Like basically over my dead body is basically what they said. They just said, not a chance. And I mean, with every article that mentioned, like Phil Hill might have mentioned that he had a hot rod, or, Stu Hilborn, or, any of the people that they considered a high level person that had a hot rod, I would underline it and send it to the guys at Pebble Beach. And this went on for about 10 years. And finally, in 1997, I got a fax. I still have the fax from Lauren Tryon. Says, Bruce, are you sitting down? We're going to do a category for hot rods at Pebble Beach in 1997. Well, it was great fun, and I took Doane Spencer's Roadster, and Doane Spencer was well known in the sports car racing circles as well. And it was wonderful because what it did, a lot of the judges, I mean the guys, the Rolls Royce judges and the Packard judges, they came over and they said, yeah, I had one just like that. Well, all of a sudden they realized that guys like yourself, high-level guys that in the community and judges and all these people started out in hot rodding. That's what kind of like nurtured the whole love of the automobile. So the hot rodding at Pebble Beach was a huge success. And I might add, they've now had it 3 times since then. They don't want to do it every year because they say, well, I want to turn this into a hot rod show. And frankly, that's just fine.
Yeah.
Once every other year is just great. So they had 97, and then they took a bye in 98, and they came back in 99, and then they came back in 2001. And they'll probably take a bye this year and come back next year. So it's great fun. And they're doing coupes and, roadsters, and they'll do dry lakes cars. And it's a fun thing. And like you say, you started out with your channel car, and what do? You go into an Allen, which was an English hot rod.
Yeah, exactly. But hot rods, I don't know if anybody's really done a scientific examination of the genre. They really it was really a breeding ground for all kinds of things. I know that even in the very first sports car races, there were some hot rods. There was a guy from
Duffy
had a T-body thing. It was never going in a straight line, ever. But he would go like hell. You should have called it the Intimidator.
Yeah.
And there was a couple of others. There was a guy, Thatcher Darwood. I could never forget that name. But he had something that he made himself. It never went very fast because if you have a name like Thatcher Darwood, you're not going to go fast.
And Max got a hot rod with a
Max was a full hot rod.
Yeah.
And all the specials, the Baldwins and the various cars, the Manning special, they were all basically hot rods. But then slowly they made some hey, we better put shock absorbers on it. What about brakes? What do you mean brakes? And they would start to modify them so that they would, work a little bit on the courses. And eventually they got some pretty good handling cars.
Right.
But it's been a breeding ground for all kinds of things, and I'm sure that Detroit paid some close attention to some of the things that were going on.
Mm-hmm.
So Hot Rod.
So it's wonderful.
Your dirty word when you mentioned about your parents would hide the magazine.
Yeah.
The Hot Rod magazine was like Playboy. It was like,
That's right.
don't you dare look at that magazine.
It was, in fact, really cute because I was looking, speaking of that, I was looking at some of the old hot rods and they had their like trophy girl or their parts girl, and they'd have some girl holding up a camshaft with a bathing suit that looked like, a full wraparound. But
Right.
that was Peterson, For all we know, Peterson inspired Hot Rod or Playboy magazine, he seems to have started everything else, But it was, hot rodding, and then came the sports cars and the Europeans, and, so it all has its place, and I think it's great you're going to, chat with Wally. Did you get a chance to talk to Ray Brock?
I did, yeah, we had an interview with Ray Brock and Ack Miller a couple of months ago. We did both Ray and Ack Miller.
Oh, yeah, with El Caballo.
Yeah. In fact, Ray said, I'll bring Ack because he's too sick to make it over.
Oh, isn't
And
that
so
funny?
Ray drove him over.
Well, Ray was a very, very dear friend of mine, and we did a lot of fun things together, and I'm just so glad you should talk to Alex Exidius, too. He'd be a fun one to talk to.
He's on our list.
SoCal Speed Shop, in any way that I can help.
Well,
I'd love to be a part of it, just perpetuate the enthusiasm.
well, this is all for some kid down 20 years from now that sees this car or whatever, and I wonder what kind of a person it was that drove that.
Some goofball.
Yeah, now he's going to find out.
Well, I, for one, really appreciate what you're doing.
Well, it's
I
been
very much
been a lot of fun for
both
us.
you and Steve,
Really enjoy it.
and I know it's going to be appreciated. Maybe not this particular segment, but some of the old timers will love them. And I just want to thank everybody and thank all the legends that made this such a wonderful, wonderful hobby. It's been great for my family and for all. So if you want, we can take a little tour of the garage and maybe have a look around and.
Okay, well, let's we'll break it now, and then we'll take a little walk around, okay?
Two board track motorcycles that actually ran right here in Beverly Hills. This panorama here is the Los Angeles Speedway, which is right on the corner of Wilshire and Santa Monica Boulevard. And it was almost the size of Indy, and it was a wooden track.
Wow.
This is a 1914 Indian and a 1915 Excelsior. The Excelsior was a very, very rare and fast bike. First bike to do 100 miles an hour average around the track. Now, you have no suspension. This is one of two in existence, and a very, very rare motorcycle indeed. This is kind of how they ran, with all the, oil and patina stains. And that's like $100. Yeah, you'd lay down and just honker down. So that was
These are almost like bicycle handlebars.
Yeah, they're notched back. They're just a little different, but you've got the the levers there. It's all nickel plated. And then this is a 1937 Bugatti. It had 57C. It was delivered with the compressor. The C stands for compressor. And we took this to Pebble Beach about 3 years ago and won the most beautiful car in motion. They had a rally.
Oh, really?
And it was a 100-mile rally, and we took first prize, so it was really fun. So it runs as good as it looks. And of course, the interiors of these are just so beautiful. This was restored by the mechanics were restored by Ivan Dutton in England. And then we did the cosmetics here.
Look at those seats.
Isn't that wonderful?
Wow.
And I met the fellow in Europe that owned it way back when. And he said, I can't believe you restored this car. It was such a nice original car. Well, when I bought it, somebody had done a very expensive mechanical job, but a very poor cosmetic job, so I just kind of redid the cosmetics on it. But it's a wonderful piece, and just, what can I say? It's really fun. On the wall there are pictures of the Duesenbergs. I've had a number of Duesenbergs, and that was my first one there. That belonged to Dolores Del Rio. And we bought that in a basket from Byron Tarnitzer. I mean, there weren't two pieces bolted together, and we took first prize with that.
Oh.
And we've had several other Duesenbergs. The one we're doing now is a Murphy convertible coupe that was done for Colonel McCormick in Chicago, and has a very, very, I mean, it looks like George Barris did it. It has such a radical roof line. And, you know, so we had a good time with that. Here's another picture you might enjoy. We brought the first race car to Pebble Beach in an open wheel race car. That was the number 98, the Agajanian Special. It won Indy in 1952 with Troy Ruttman driving it, and we took first prize and took the first ever Tony Holman Award with that car. So we've had some firsts at Pebble Beach. We won the first rally tour trophy with the Bugatti, the first Holman Award with that car, and we won the first Bachelor Award with our hot rod. That's another Murphy convertible coupe there, the little red one, and we've had fun with that.
So this is
Clark Gable's car.
Gable's car. Yeah, this
And
color just kills.
isn't it wonderful? And you know, when you the seating position in this car, you kind of look down and you see the reflection in the hood.
Uh-huh.
And let me just open this up here. And you can see the reflections of the palm trees. That's a oil filter that I just threw back. I'm going to service it. That's in St. Christopher over there on the dashboard. But everything, the carpets are all, you know, original, and it's, you know, a really nice running car.
I recognize this hardware right here. That's,
Yeah, the seat recliner.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of crank that. It's good.
Porsches had that same, early Porsches.
Yeah, they did.
Had that exact same.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. My wife drives this more than I do. And it just runs. I mean, you can't even hear the engine run when this is...
That's a 300?
300 SC. It's got the same engine as a Gullwing. It's fuel injected. They call it an Einspritz motor.
Einspritz.
And then here's the luggage. I don't know. Back in those days, there were so many options. That's all original carpet, everything, original tools.
Any of his old clothes in there?
First thing we looked at, there was nothing. I'm afraid.
Not even a handkerchief?
Yeah.
Because that'd be worth
That's right.
as much as
I
the
could
car.
sell that. Yeah, pay for
I got Clark's
the car.
old shorts.
Yeah. Well, we have the original letter from, you know, John Stiegler that delivered the car to Clark, and he kind of remembered the event. And here was a check from Clark Gable to Geary's in Beverly Hills, my old shop. He wrote it out, and a fellow gave that to me.
I used to work in a gas station when I was a kid at the corner of Woodley and Ventura and Encino,
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was my customer.
Oh, that's
I
right.
used to
Yeah.
come in there, had a
That's-
Dodge Power Wagon, which was kind of a deer hunter's car.
Yeah, he was a real sportsman. And this is just a bunch of, you know, bits and pieces. There's a trophy there from Phil Hill won. Looks like a Bugatti or a Sterling Moss trophy rather. And these are just some bits and pieces. They elected me into the Dry Lakes Hall of Fame. That's this little ring here. We also won the first hot rod trophy at the Louis Vuitton in New York with the Pearson Brothers Coupe. We won with that. And that other tall trophy in the back is the first Motorama trophy, Autorama in Detroit. We won that with, or Frank Mack won it. We have that car at the Peterson. We also have that chopped Merc at the Peterson. And my son drove that car to high school. I keep about a dozen or so cars at the Peterson Museum.
Well, it's a good place to store cars.
Yeah, it is. And this is just kind of a mishmash. This is a 41 Indian, my birth year, and Indian 4. And the next bike was John Surtees' bike. That's a BSA Gold Star,
What is that bike?
and that's a wonderful bike. And then next to it is a Vincent Black Shadow, and Bill Edgar lived right around the corner. And
Was that John's bike?
John's bike, no, but that is John's bike there with Raleigh Free riding it.
Raleigh Free.
Remember him, lived in Hollywood?
Yeah, crazy.
Crazy guy. And then I have a Norton Manx that's at the museum on display. And then this is, of course, the providers of all my stuff were Pep Boys, you know, so there's a lot of Pep Boy memorabilia around the garage, that graphics and so forth. Later on, it was a little bit of Willem Hahn, but mostly Pep Boys. This is a 1958 Speedster, and oh, it's wonderful. I've been a Porsche-phile since 1960. And then the car up front here is kind of what they call an outlaw Porsche. It's a bit of a hot rod. It's a 57 Porsche Coupe, but we've done it up like a GT car with all the aluminum and lightweight trim and roll bar and, you know, gas tank through the hood. Good fun. And we've taken that on several rallies.
It's a beauty, though.
Isn't it neat? It's just, I mean, I just happen to be a real fan of Porsche. I always have.
I had the 7th Porsche that John brought west of the Mississippi.
Really?
52.
Oh boy. This is another 32 Ford Hot Rod Highboy. We call this Checkered Past. And Tommy Sparks and I drove this to Aspen, Colorado. Not too long ago. Kind of a
That's a
fun
beauty.
look. What I can do, I can open the garage and you can take a step back, so pardon the noise.
That had to be a little cool drive, didn't it?
Yeah, hot and cold. Good fun. Well, this is kind of the collection, and it's
great.
a lifetime of fun, and thanks so much for coming by.
Hey, thank you very much.
It's
Thanks for your hospitality.
It's always a
wonderful.
pleasure. It's always a pleasure,
It's
and
wonderful.
I hope
Really appreciate it.
you'll come by often, and just want to wish everybody out there a healthy and happy motoring career and hobby. God bless.
Okay, you guys.
Okay.
Oh,
This-
yeah, we're back here in the garage.
Back in the garage, looking at a picture of the pit stop for one of Briggs Cunningham's 1960 Le Mans Corvettes. And this is a fun picture too. This was the start of the race. And there were 3 cars, one driven by Briggs, one driven, number 2, by Dick Thompson, and number 3 by John Fitch. They both had co-drivers as well, but they did well. They scored 8th overall and 1st in class. So that was the first Corvette run
Pretty
at
good.
Le Mans.
Actually, that was really good.
It was good, and it's the same as they did, today, actually. And then these were pictures of let me see. Well, these are more pictures of Briggs. I don't know how deep we want to get into that, but these were just some records. I don't know if you want to. More pictures of the Briggs Cunningham. And when Briggs did things, he did it rather well. He had his own garage right in Le Mans, and he had the cars there, shipped them over. There was Briggs. And I've got, some wonderful documentation from the period. He brought the car over as luggage for John Fitch on the Queen Elizabeth. Isn't that amazing? They keep great records on this stuff, so it made it rather nice. Then I had it at Goodwood this last year, and then these are some pictures. I'll probably start with these. This is Eleanor and John von Neumann in the TRC.
And that's the car you're restoring?
That's the car we're restoring right now, and he was extremely successful in this car.
Yeah.
And these were some wonderful pictures. I still have the original interior still in the car.
Yeah, John just had an 80th birthday
Yeah,
just recently.
this is a wonderful picture of Santa Barbara with, I believe that's Josie and a TR pontoon fender, and then John on the left, and of course Belchowski in the middle.
Yeah,
And then what happened was, in 1957, Richie Ginther put a V12 motor in it, the TR 250 motor, and here he is racing. Now there's a bit of a hot rod. I'm not Let me take this, that might make it a little easier. But that's the car right there. Aston Martin. And this is a wonderful picture, I think, of John racing the car.
Yeah.
And it also raced in Mexico. It's a little tough to get on video, but it's a great car, and we're restoring it now. We'll have it for the Ferrari meet shortly. So I just kind of love the history of these cars, and again, it makes it all the more enjoyable when you
Yeah.
can share it with people. So we're sharing it with you.
Well, thank you again. By the way, it's April 15th, 2002.
Tax day.
Tax day.
Yeah.
I'm in good shape. They're never going to catch me.
Yeah, that's right. We used to forget it.